Hello, everybody. I am Dave Lee with International Podcast Day. Welcome to our 2018 celebration and event. We're really looking forward to the 30 plus hours we have scheduled for you. This hour, we have Heather Welch from the Sun Power. Let me get this right. Sunshine and Power Cuts podcast. Heather, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. And if you couldn't tell, Heather is from New Zealand, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and so you're definitely joining us from a ways away from where I'm at in the west coast of the United States here in California. But we want to thank you for joining and participating as a speaker of this International Podcast Day event. I did quickly want to thank our 2018 sponsors. Without them, this event would not be taking place. So thank you so much to Blueberry, who is our platinum sponsor, and our silver sponsors, which is Repurpose IO and Podcast Success Academy. Thank you again. Make sure you guys head over to internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors to find some free giveaways that they're doing for International Podcast Day. Well, with that said, Heather, thank you so much again for joining us. I'm going to leave you the floor, and we really look forward to your contribution to International Podcast Day 2018.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. My name is Heather, and I am the host of a podcast called Sunshine and Power Cuts. And that's a little bit different in and of itself, but I'll get to that in a moment. Welcome to everyone who's in the live chat for International Podcast Day. I think that's the exciting thing about this whole event is that we're getting together and celebrating the power of podcasting. Um, Podcasting is this incredible opportunity for us to share our stories and to use our voice in order to do that, but also to make connections with other people who are interested in podcasts, other podcast hosts. And there's a lot of amazing people in the live chat, some of the names that I recognize and some that are new. So I hope that you're enjoying the celebrations so far. Uh, Shout out to some of the people that I do know: Adam from I'd Dead Out, uh, Emily Prokop from the Story Behind podcast, Derek from Sometimes Geek, Banjo from Podcastage. There's a lot of uh, incredible connections you can make along the journey. And starting from the very beginning, I think that the most important connection that we make is with ourselves and the topic that we want to talk about. We kind of have this passion that we want to share something and create something to be able to share that with other people. So getting on board with that connection and finding our confidence because we're making something to put out to the world is incredible. And then along the way, we might connect with resources and tools to be able to help us. And then make other connections and collaborations with other podcast hosts, whether they're aligned with us or whether they're totally different ones in totally different areas, because we join groups and become a part of them and interact there. So, connections are pretty important. It's something that I really value. I live rurally in New Zealand. I don't have a connection to the power grid. So, that's where my podcast is a little bit different. I'm sharing stories from my off grid life. Have we got connection issues to the stream? That's one interesting thing about this whole thing. We're here connected. We're all over the world and connected with the internet to celebrate International Podcast Day. But internet connections can be a little bit troubling, and mine has definitely been that um, this year. And I've had the opportunity to connect with a bunch of people and talk to them via video like this and interact with them, which is a great way of engaging with people. But sometimes my internet's dropped out. Sometimes it's gone all digital, and it's a challenge. But it's amazing that we have this opportunity with the internet to be able to get together. And yeah, so starting from the beginning, some of the connections that I made were with my topic that I want to talk about, which is my experience living off the power grid. And so I don't have a connection to the power grid, like I said, but I have built up all these other amazing connections with other people who are passionate about the topics they're talking about, and international um, all sorts of different international topics with the podcasting community and the listeners who are amazing, and Hey Laco, and also podcasting groups like Podcast Brunch Club, which was mentioned earlier, and even from New Zealand is in the chat. So amazing that we're all here. Um, when we're connecting with things, one of the things is looking at what's something in common, or what we're interested in and what will help us. And that can be uh, information when we research the topic we're talking about. It can be the way we prepare our episodes, it can be the music that we include and the format that we set out for our show. And then it can be connecting with the podcast hosting services that help us share that message with everybody. And then finding a place where we can get help along the journey. And Stargate Pioneer is in the chat. He and Stephen John Drew are from Better Podcasting and have been an incredible connection for me along this journey because their show, Better Podcasting, has so much information about helping hobby podcasters to learn and grow on this journey of podcasting. So I want to say a huge thank you to them for all of the encouragement and support, but not only that, the actual resource in their podcast itself. um, there are other ways that you can bring into when you're starting. So you might not have a lot of connections with building an audience. I mean, that comes with time, people discovering your show and how they do that. So one of the ways we do that is get on the social media platforms and have Twitter accounts and Facebook pages and Facebook groups where our communities can come together and we can build our own community where people can connect with us and talk about the show. Some people ask to their audience to send in questions. Bandrew in the chat has the Bandrew Says podcast, and he has an Ask Bandrew segment. So there is a segment where people can send in questions um, and get them answered. And that's a really fun way to engage the audience and to ask them what they thought of something. If there are topics that you talk about that are more topical or news related, ask for people's thoughts on what they are to help bring them into it. Hey, Tim. um, So there's those platforms that we can be on to make a bit of a presence for people to be able to find us, sharing our episodes, sharing other information related to our podcast to kind of broaden the information that we've shared within that. And then podcasting community itself has a bunch of groups where we can join up with other podcasters and get the experience from everyone who's been on this journey because we all might have slightly different uh, paths that we take to get to where we are. And so that can be really valuable to share that with each other and get support in times like this when you're really nervous to come on a live stream and you get to hang out with a friend beforehand who tells you that it's going to be okay. Um, there is it's having a support. So connections are important because it helps obviously share the message that we're trying to share through podcasting. It helps us get together and talk about things, the ideas that we're passionate about. It helps us feel supported and a part of something. And like today, celebrating. So yeah. Some of the podcast groups that are out there that I've joined and had an interaction with and found really useful. A Lady Pod Squad and Elise Lucas from Best Forevers is part of Lady Pod Squad. It's an amazing place for people to come together. There's the Underdog Podcast Community, which is another one, and there's larger groups like She Podcasts. And for podcast listeners, because I know not everyone here will be a podcast host, there's Podcasts We Listen To, which is a huge group of incredible podcast listeners that come together and talk about the podcasts they listen to. And that's amazing. And we also mentioned sometime in the chat today that there is the Podcast Brunch Club, which I am the host for the Wellington, New Zealand chapter, and Evan is from that. So that's one of my connections from New Zealand. It's nice to meet up in person to talk about podcasts. What I love about this whole live streaming thing, and I am incredibly nervous if you can't tell, and I've done a few live streams this year, but each time it is a little bit nerve wracking, is that you can see me and you can hear me. And I love that about podcasting, which is technically kind of audio focused, where you can listen. There's that sort of delay between when you and I might not get to interact when you just get to listen to the podcast. But here you are hanging out, chatting in the chat, and you can see and hear me. So that is amazing. It's just this whole other level of engagement. So, yeah, I love that. I love celebrating connections. And I have had the privilege to be a guest on other shows. That is one way you can connect with other people. I think that came out on the first stream, introductory stream, was connecting other podcasters with each other, collaborating on different projects with each other. You can interview guests. You can ask people who are experts in the topic that might not necessarily be podcasters, but invite them to be on your show. You can, in some of these podcasting communities, collaborate on different projects, whether that be for your own show or theirs, or make a whole new show together. If you've got something in common to talk about, there's a connection there. And you can build on that and go go from there. Some of the connections I had with Jim Collison. I was able to be a guest on Home Gadget Geeks, which was amazing, and talk about kind of the off grid side of things. I've done a couple of guests on my own show for the Sunshine episodes and for the Power Cut ones. And it's getting to hear different people's stories and journeys and talking through that with them and learning from each other. We can feel a little bit isolated when even now it's you can feel a little bit isolated because there's that sort of disconnect between me and you're not here. But when you get together, and whether that be in a chat session or a Facebook live or a live stream like this, and someone leaves you feedback or they leave a rating and a review, for example, that they've connected, and you can hear the feedback, that feedback loop that comes in is this. It's exciting to get that feedback. It's exciting to hear from someone else, to not feel like you're alone, because when you're recording, you're just behind the mic and then you're putting it out there into the world. So celebrating these connections are really important, and that's why I'm pretty passionate about International Podcast Day. There's some people who are part of the Underdog podcast community, and that it's a nice and supportive group that everyone enjoys interacting with. So it's good that you can find a place where you feel supported, and enjoy being a part of something, because it's also overwhelming too, especially when you go into that and there's a lot of people there trying to find your place and introduce yourself and find the way in which to interact with people. I think the important thing is about being yourself and being genuine and looking at the way those different groups operate so that you can be a part of them in a way that flows with the rhythm of that particular group, because some groups have rules and they like to do three different things like that. So getting familiar with how they work and seeing where you fit, and you might not be a fit for all of them, but there are a few out there, so you should hopefully be able to find a place where you do feel a part of it. And the other side of that is too, like I said, about you can create your own community. And one of the great things about social media and things and different platforms are there are all sorts of different ways to build your own community. And I like that some of the people that I've had a chance to chat with, um, is that they interact with. So I might listen to Emily's podcast, the Story Behind podcast, for example, and I like to hang out in her group and hear some of the different trivia that people like to share with each other, um, which is an extension on her podcast, and it adds for this whole other level of engagement and relationship building, and just more that we can get from the experience. So that's really cool. And not only have I guested on a few things, but this year I decided that celebrating connections was going to be a huge thing for me, to let people know that I appreciate them. Like today, and I'm going to have, if you see on social media using the hashtag International Podcast Day, you'll see a lot of people celebrating. But letting people, the podcasts that you listen to, know that you do enjoy what they make, and thanking them for their time and effort they put into it, because it takes a lot. People are investing a lot of themselves into it. And I know that I really appreciate everyone who listens, because you're investing a lot of your time and energy to interact and connect with the content that we're making. So using those hashtags and things, and bringing the conversation so that it's more at the forefront and there's a lot more interaction happening is awesome. Um, yeah, you can, in the chat, they're saying that they can leave a few groups and find new ones. That's definitely the way. It's about finding where you fit in. That might take a little bit of time, but Facebook groups are one. Discord is another one, which is quite interesting. I don't know how many people know about Discord, but it's an incredible place to uh, get together. And there's text channels, but also the voice chat capability, which has been a lot of fun in some of the communities that I'm in. It happens on a regular basis. We hang out and get to talk to each other, which kind of brings the whole podcasting thing on the audio level. You get to hear the inflection that people use and the way they describe things. And I love getting to know people that way. Um, Yeah. So I think there's a little bit of a difference between connection and engagement. Connection, you can reach out and find information and sort of do it on a surface level thing. The voice chat and Discord, for example, is more of an engagement thing. And you're going to have different levels of connections with all sorts of different resources and people along the journey. But celebrating the ones that have helped you, and sharing that experience with other people, it allows us all to learn and to grow. And so this year I hosted 2 live streaming events, which are called the Sunshine Summit. Um, The idea was to basically get people together that I've connected with in a live stream, where we're talking to each other. We have the live chat capability, and to talk about the connections that they've made along their journeys. Because, like I said, everyone has a different pathway that they take, and you can listen to a podcast and not necessarily know the story of how they got there unless that's part of their show and what they talk about. They could have a tech channel and talk about tech news and things, but you don't sort of hear the back journey of how they got there. And so the Sunshine Summit was a way to um, highlight that and to sort of shout out and say, hey, these people were amazing on this journey. I really enjoyed them. This is how I found them. Or, for example, it was just celebrating the fact that some of them were podcasting together, like Perry and Lindsay Johnson, who are incredible people. And they've got two podcasts, Hello Life WTF and The Pod Stuff. The Hello Life WTF was their show about themselves and their marriage and their journey with their family. And they shared a lot there. It got very personal, and sometimes that's a little bit uncomfortable to listen to, but they put themselves out there, and that genuine sharing and honesty that they have sort of built up this amazing community where people that they've connected with in podcasting have rallied around them because they've struggled a lot this year. Perry has gone through or is going through cancer, and the podcasting community and some of the other connections they've made of podcast listeners as well have rallied around and raised money to help support them on their journey. So I think the power of podcasting is absolutely incredible for what we can achieve. One of my other Sunshine Summit guests was Nick Haskins, who is part of Epic Film Guys, where he makes a date to catch up with Justin, his friend, and they talk about movies and things. But he's also got the Restaurant podcast. And what uh, he does there is share his passion for food. But Epic Film Guys did an event for live stream for the cure. So they collected a bunch of podcasters together, and they the podcasts, we did our own segments, kind of like International Podcast Day, but at the same time, we're raising funds for the Cancer Research Institute. So we have this amazing platform of making content, of being entertaining, of sharing information, of learning from each other and supporting each other. And then we can come together and do even more amazing things. I see that there's a link, couple of links in the chat about Discord, and yeah, I would encourage people to check it out. It's a little bit different, but it is a pretty useful and valuable tool that I really enjoy using. And there's lots of different things like that that we can use along the way. When you're reaching out to your audience, I mentioned earlier that you can ask them for questions. You can ask them to interact that way. I've seen people asking them to use like hashtags, like hashtag International Podcast Day, and little things in your episodes to try and get that interaction happening, having a space for them to hang out and sharing things that are relevant or whatever it might be to help build the relationship and get to know you better and get to know them. Yeah. I know that a lot of it is digital. Um, my podcast, the Sunshine episodes, like I mentioned, it's got two different types of episodes. So the Sunshine ones are focusing on inspiration drawn from nature. And while that's important, I think, because we can be wired and digital and connected online a lot, to get out there and appreciate what we've got right outside the window, to help us sort of fuel ourselves so that we can do all these creative passions that we want to do. So I like to celebrate that connection with nature that I have. And it's not been easy, just like this podcasting journey is not an easy one. Connecting with your content takes up time and energy to research it and put it together to present it. Um, in my case, you can have internet connection issues and it makes it hard to do live streaming. Um, there's all sorts of little challenges along the way, but when we can know that someone else has gone through that as well, or just say, hey, I'm struggling. Is there anyone, you know, get a little bit of feedback or a bit of support and be uplifted? That's amazing. So the Sunshine Summit's brought together 23 people this year. In March, we held the first one, and it was 11 guests over 8 days. And there was a huge range of podcasts. But then in August, when I hosted the second one, we kind of brought it into content creators as well. So went outside of podcasting. There's a lot that we can learn from people who are making content, creating things. And I see some hashtags that people are using in the chat in order to engage the audience, like hashtag expat rewind, hashtag virtual expat, hashtag changing scripts. So that's pretty cool. In the first summit of guests that I had, we launched it with Elisa Lucas from Best Rivers, and her podcast is about connections in terms of friendships. She was an amazing person to have on because she researches it and she has a lot of valuable knowledge about the relationships and friendships that we have and the challenges that we can face. And that's how our shows are kind of aligned because mine has the challenges of living off the grid, the challenges of relying on sunshine for power when there isn't that much sunshine, and hers are when our friendships face challenges and how we can work through them to move forward or to let them go when they're not serving us. Um, so that was amazing. Then we had Better Podcasting, and I mentioned Stephen Jondra and Stargate Pioneer share this incredible resource with hobby podcasters to help them learn and grow, and they are incredibly supportive as well. Then I had Paul Chomo from the Varmints podcast, and his one is about animals, and they share. It's a really entertaining way of sharing information about animals that you might think you know about, but you might learn something new as well. Plus, also just really enjoy the listen uh, of how they connect all of those the animals with like things like in pop culture as well. So not just the animals themselves, but how they feature in other areas of our lives, I guess. I had Chris Carlson from the Podcasting Couch, where he interviewed people, other podcast hosts, and he connected them with a music track. So he looked into the ways where he could find musicians who are making music and tying that into a theme that he related to the podcast host. So it was pretty incredible to get to talk to him and have him on as a guest because I think that was his very first guest spot. Adam Higgins from Odd Dad Out has been a huge connection for me. We connected through a podcast share account that Emily set up last year, which is a Twitter account, and it was a place for podcasters and podcast listeners to kind of share about the podcasts they were listening to, what they were working on for a week on Twitter. And it sort of pulled a whole bunch of people that not necessarily would have connected because we're not all in each other's genre or interest areas, but we might recognize them or just have been following the account and got to see what they were talking about for the week. And so Adam picked up my podcast from there, and he's been an incredible support over the last year. So thank you so much, Adam. And like I mentioned, I had Perry and Lindsay Johnson from Hollow Life WTF and the Pod Stuff. They're still going through their struggles. They've put podcasting on hold. I think they might have come back for a few Facebook Lives and things, which is a way that they're sharing the story of this journey that they're on. So it's powerful seeing and hearing them because that's such a huge thing to go through. But that they've made time to connect with their audience is just incredible, and it helps us hear about what they're up to because we care about them, and yeah, just allowing the time to share the details of what they've been going through has been amazing. Emily's mentioned the Story Behind podcast. She connects the histories and trivia and things around ordinary things and shares it in a really informational episode in an entertaining way. And her book, she's connected with a publisher and is going to be publishing her very first book, which is coming out soon. So that's exciting. I'm looking forward to that coming out. I was just reading the chat. Sorry. Her biggest connection in podcasting was Nick Haskins, and he joined me the next day in the March Sunshine Summit. And he is part of Epic Film Guys and the Restaurant podcast. He is so passionate about food in the restaurant one. It's really inspiring and hard not to drool over the delicious recipes and things. But he also goes out and reviews places where he goes to eat. So it's fascinating what you can pick up and the way that people present topics because there might be a bunch of other food related podcasts and things, but we all have a different way of sharing it. So yeah, there's something for everyone in podcast and as podcast hosts. Then I had Gareth and Bex from the Gareth's Random Ramblings, who are Kiwis, but they're living in Australia. And I think I connected with them on Twitter as well. Twitter's been this amazing platform for making connections and making them fairly easily because you can comment on something, you can like and retweet it. But what I find is that, like I said earlier, the connection and engagement thing is different. So following someone is one thing, liking something is another level. Then actually commenting on and interacting with or following the GIF game, which I'm not very good at. Adam Higgins is really good at the GIF game. But it's this amazing platform that we have to be able to connect with different people. And one of the ways people are celebrating the connections they've made is through Follow Friday. So hashtag Follow Friday would have happened just recently before the weekend. And for me, I'm in New Zealand, so I'm working across time zones. So I make it a hashtag Follow Friday, but also a hashtag Shout Out Saturday to try and cover both time zones. And it's a fun way of sort of highlighting and thanking the people that you listen to. Other people do listening logs, which is incredible. You get to see what people have listened to that day or in the week. And you might pick up some suggestions there of new things that you can check out. Thank you, Steph. It's very nice. I'm glad that you feel like I'm talking to you. um, I really appreciate everyone who's participating in the live chat. Sorry, it's kind of a little bit hard to keep track of and kind of keep on topic at the same time, but I'm so glad that you're there. So Twitter's amazing. Interacting on Twitter's amazing. Interacting in the Facebook groups is amazing. The Facebook Live thing is really cool. I like the Discord thing for that actual interaction because the Facebook Live is still that little bit of disconnection, but it's something. It's a way of getting to know someone a little bit more outside of the content that we're creating, and I think that is really valuable. So Gareth and Bex from Gareth's Random Ramblings is where I was up to. They're Kiwis, but they're living in Australia. Met them on Twitter, kind of interacted, got to hang out with them a couple of times because we practiced a live stream before we went live for the Sunshine Summit. And they actually managed to come on board live during that week, which is amazing. And hearing about each of their podcasting journeys, because we were all at different stages. I think I've only been podcasting since August 2017. Some of them have been podcasting a lot longer. And then, yeah, it's just incredible to be able to bring us all together. Then I finished out the March Sunshine Summit with Bandrew Scott of the Podcasted YouTube channel, but he also hosts the Bandrew Says podcast. And he's one of the first connections I made in podcasting over a year ago now. And he suggested better podcasting as a resource when I first began. And so that's how that relationship came on board. Emily was there in the live chat when I showed up for a better podcasting live recording of their show. And it's crazy that a year has gone by and all of the things that we've managed to do, because I went through and looked at all the collaborations I've done this year, and a lot of them have featured Bandrew. So I just want to say thank you so much for all of your support and help over this year. It's been amazing. The March one was kind of like a celebration because it was 6 months through my podcasting journey, and to have made connections in that time to be able to ask 11 or 12 people to come on board for a live stream event, for not having done live streams before that. I don't do Facebook Lives, I don't do Periscope streams or anything like that. But these people were so grateful and gracious to come on board and to participate with me, because live streaming's, like I said, it's a nerve-wracking thing. Not everyone's going to be keen to do it, but they did it. They came and they showed up and they shared this amazing information about their journeys, and I think it's really valuable. There were people who made connections from that summit. Some of the podcast hosts didn't know each other, so they made connections before we even launched the Sunshine Summit, and they decided to listen to each other. Adam Higgins did an incredible round-out review of everybody who was a guest, and he discovered some new things. Then we had people come by the live chat, some audiences of of either my show or the guest's show, and they got to interact in the live chat feature like you all are interacting in the live chat today. So, yeah. March rounded out the Sunshine Summit for celebrating 6 months, and it also happened to be the week before my birthday. So what better way to celebrate a birthday with hanging out with friends that I've made, and they are friends. I think that podcasting's this thing that allows you the opportunity to have an outlet, a conversational outlet, to be creative, to make something, and share that with people. But then also to develop these relationships that become and can become lifelong friendships, or just open up opportunities for other collaboration type things. So, yeah. SP. Ah, I've heard so much about Sunshine and Power Guts via Better Podcasting. That's very cool. That's another connection. It's amazing when people learn things from other things when we do collaborate across, or we mention other things in our shows, or we mention the listeners who ask questions. It's fun hearing your name announced. So, Mr. Nessie, that's awesome. Yeah. Then I thought that was cool. I did the Sunshine Summit in August, just in March, the way we're doing this International Podcast Day through Google Hangouts, and that was a good way to start for someone live streaming who's not super confident about setting up a live streaming experience and wanting to connect with people. Google Hangouts is a really easy way to do that. Um, that makes it fairly simple, and uh, I could focus on having the conversations with people without having to worry about the tech side of it. Literally just had to connect and send a link to the Google Hangout, and people were able to join. Then in August, I wanted to change it a little bit and sort of add a little bit more value to the experience so people could connect with it in a more engaging way. And I ran that one through OBS, which is a streaming program, and invited people to join me with Appearin. And there's different things that you learn along the way. Like I've learned a lot about connected with a lot of information about audio editing and live streaming and technology and tools like how to what microphone to get and what microphones are good for what situations and things like that. Um, so there's lots of ways of connecting with different things. And I just want to answer Steph's question, the podcast that the origin story of podcasts. Emily did a episode as well on the history of International Podcast Day, which was a fun one. Um, so in August, we did sort of a different kind of live stream. We had 12 guests over 7 days. And basically, I opened up a calendar, a booking system to allow people to book in times that would work for them. I asked people in advance, I think about 3 months before either of the summits happened, to sort of say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you like to get on board? We're going to be celebrating the connections that you've made along the journeys. And then on after that, sort of kept in touch with them. And connections one thing, engagement's another, and then communication, like keeping that relationship happening comes down to communication and how much time you put into keeping the relationship going. So you might have heard, if you've been part of different things, that commenting on things or submitting questions or liking or retweeting is good. But then I've checked in with people just to say randomly out of the blue, are you okay? How's it going? And people really appreciate that. Or leaving feedback, like I said earlier, and doing the whole rate and review thing and then letting people know that you've done that. So there's different ways of doing it, but keeping the communication lines open is one way of maintaining those kinds of connections that we do make. The 12 guests that I had in August, a couple of them were new ones, which was really exciting. And then I had the incredible opportunity to have some of the originals from the first summit say that they'd love to come back on board and do it again. And I think that's an amazing thing when people really enjoy something and want to come for a second round and do it again. I know that there's going to be a lot of new people finding International Podcast Day because new people come on as podcasters each year. Um, and as we spread the word about podcasting, more and more people are going to find out about it. So that's really cool. And I'm grateful for the new guests that I had in August, but also the ones who were keen to come back on board. We had Derek from Sometimes Geek podcast, who's in the chat. I'm not sure if he's still there, but he was there. And his show is on gaming. So that's totally different to what I do. Mine is kind of about wellness and being uplifted and reconnecting with nature, as well as sharing my stories of living off the grid. But I really enjoy, we all enjoy, all have different interests that range a whole broad variety of topics. And his one is on gaming, and he does a short show like mine. Mine's under 10 minutes, his are about 10. And what I like about the way that he was interacting in the groups that we were in, which was Underdog Podcast Community, was that he was really genuine and helpful. And I could see that ring out from the interactions that he was having with other people. And so it was a privilege to be able to ask him to be a part of this and share the stories that he would have had, because his connections would have been different to mine. I haven't connected with a whole lot of gaming podcasts, but they are interesting. So thank you, Derek. I'm making him blush apparently. So that's okay. He nearly made me cry. So it's fun getting to know people and getting to hear their stories. And he was an amazing person to launch the second Sunshine Summit with. Then we had Rhett Hall from Brain Trust Network and Cardinal Branding and Designs, which is a new project that he's launched, but also the Brain Trust Trust Network, Cardinal Branding. Wallfly podcast is the other one. And I just want to pause here on the topic of networks. Podcast networks are interesting, and sometimes there are amazing ones that bring a bunch of podcasters together, and you can have that support with a network. Um, Gunna Geek Network is one that Better Podcasting is a part of. The Brain Trust Network was a network that had a bunch of podcasts come together within. I think that's recently been disbanded, but I mean, it was an amazing family kind of feel where they help each other and help each other grow and share their um, resources with each other to help lift each other up so that we can all strive and achieve, do all these wonderful things that we want to do through podcasting. So it was amazing to be able to talk to him. I connected with him way back, probably before I even started podcasting somehow, and have enjoyed watching his journey. And I'm looking forward to cheering him on for his new venture, which is Cardinal Branding and Designs, just kind of graphic design and sort of outside of the sphere of podcasting. But I think he's helping other people with their live streams, which is amazing that he's using the skills that he's built up to be able to help them with the content that they want to make and share. I see that there might be some collaborations in the chat happening, so that's awesome that the connections are happening as we're doing this. I rounded out day one of the August Sunshine Summit with the Off Center Archers podcast, which was with Steph and Anthony, and they are an archery podcast and they talk about all things archery. And I met them through the Podcastage Discord server. Podcastage is a YouTube channel which does mic and gear reviews, which is hosted by Bandrew. He's in the chat. And that's how I found my Samsung Q2U to begin. And I've become a part of that community and really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite communities to be a part of. There is an incredible group of people from all walks of life and all different kind of creation journeys, and even ones who aren't sharing their creations with the world, but we've all come together and got to know each other and sharing help and it's just hanging out and becoming friends. So it's lovely to be a part of that. I met Anthony there, and Steph is his wife, and they have this incredible connection as husband and wife with their passion for archery. And so that's what formulated the basis of their podcast that they share. And they've learned a lot on their audio journey through the Podcasters Discord, getting help with how to record, get better audio out of their recordings, which microphones to use. They've upgraded. So it's cool watching that process and then being able to celebrate with that with them and hang out with them. Then I had Lo Knows, who is Lona and Lara. He's a YouTube creator also, and he's been doing mic reviews, gear reviews, as well as sharing a bit more of inspirational stuff lately, and he does voiceovers and things. So a lot of the connections that I've made have come from the different groups that I've been in by branching out and just checking out what other people are doing. For example, in the Podcastage Discord server, there are people who share links. There's a promotion and links thing, and you can see what other people are doing. They might be Twitch streamers, they might be YouTubers, they might be podcasters. Networks are interesting. They can happen anywhere. And I think in one of the Sunshine Summits was the ripple effect was mentioned. So you might be here, but then as your connections grow, they branch out and you can make all sorts of new connections you hadn't even imagined were possible. So it was cool to round out that day with Anthony and Steph. And I love learning about what they're up to with the archery and how passionate they are. Plus, also, they develop their communication skills, sharing that. Same with Perry and Lindsay Johnson. They work on their communication skills through podcasting and connecting with communicating. I'm not very good at it. So hopefully this stream is going well enough and I haven't jumbled it up too much. But I've learned a lot. Back when I first started, I think I took a few goes at recording that very first episode to kind of get it how I wanted it to sound. Then it was working out that there are crutch words we use and trying to disconnect from those so we don't have to edit them out. I think once you get past that and you get a little bit more confident on the mic too, your communication skills develop, and all of that adds to the experience, and all of the things that we can learn, we can help apply them to what we're doing and make it even more amazing. I had Adam Higgins from My Dead Out come back for round 2 in August, so that was awesome to celebrate again, and he celebrated my first podversary with me. I made it to a year of podcasting in August, and I wouldn't have got here without all of the amazing people, a lot of them in the chat today, who have been here along the way, who've been listening to the podcast, who've given me feedback on it, who've connected with me and said, I like what you're doing. We do something similar. I connected with Lisa and Sam from I Shake My Head, who are in the chat, and they actually joined me as well. Lisa and Sam have been friends for a very long time, and they podcast from their car, which is quite unique. And they want to be the least stressful part of your day. So different podcasts do different things, and there is kind of an entertaining one sharing their I Shake My Head moments with you when I shake their head at different things that happen. And they're a lot of fun, and I really appreciated them coming on board for the Sunshine Summit. I also had Logan Norgal from the Paper Robots podcast, and he's a comic creator, so he is very talented and creative and talks to other creatives in his podcast who do a bunch of different things. And I connected with him through the Geeks Rising network, which is founded by Bandrew. And as a listener of the Bandrew Says podcast, Geeks Rising also hosted the Paper Robots podcast. So I got to hear Logan there, and he was one of Bandrew's important connections. And so having both of them in the Sunshine Summit was amazing to hear sort of Logan's story and then hearing Bandrew's as well. And one time, I would like to do sort of more of a live stream where we can get more of the people involved together rather than just having sort of one-on-one with me and the other podcast hosts. Tim said, shout out to all my incredibly supportive non-creators. Emily said, basically podcasters are the best people in the world. And there's some love for the new merch of I Shake My Head, which is amazing. Merchandise is a fun way of connecting with your audience too, allowing them to sort of have something that represents what you are and for them to enjoy it, whether that be t-shirts or mugs or stickers or fun things like that. So I've seen that a lot in this in this year. I have one as well. I managed to make some mugs, so I got some Sunshine and Power Cup mugs because I like coffee. That's something we can connect on if anyone has a passion for coffee. But yeah. Then I had Luke from Luke is talking as part of the Sunshine Summit. He's from Australia. He's another connection I made from the Podcastage Discord server. He's just started, and it's been awesome seeing him go from the beginning stages of a new podcaster starting out, kind of determining what his title was going to be. More mugs, more coffee. And seeing his journey go from there, because it is a journey, and he asked questions, and I think that's another way you can connect is just by asking. It's the same with getting guests to be on your show or to be a part of other things. Just ask. And it can be nerve-wracking and scary because you don't know how that's going to work out. Sometimes it might be that you're putting yourself out there and you might not get a yes, but if you don't ask, you won't know. And so I think that's an incredible thing to do. Sometimes we get a little bit of confidence being behind the microphone, and a lot of us are introverts too. So branching out is a little bit scary, but when we do, amazing things can happen. Yeah. There was the other thing I wanted to say was the reason why I love International Podcast Day and the fact that we can hang out here is because not always is it possible for us to hang out in person. There are lots of great meetups that do happen, podcast events and festivals, and podcast movement is one of them. One day I would thoroughly love to come along to one of those, but the fact that we can hang out here is awesome. When we do, amazing things happen. Yeah. Podcast Brunch Club is a way to meet up in person with other podcast listeners, and then doing fun things with your audience as well, whether that be a weekly voice chat, whether that be weekly Facebook Lives or daily Facebook Lives, or just asking them questions where they can send them in and you can answer them in the podcast. There's all sorts of different ways to do that. And the merch thing, people can buy merch and represent you and enjoy that connection. So reaching out, making that initial connection, asking for help, looking for resources that will help you on this journey, finding topics that you're interested in, other podcast hosts, other podcast listeners, coming along to things like this and hanging out in the live chat and getting to know all of the different people who've come together because they have a connection with either International Podcast Day in general, myself, or other people. There's all sorts of different ways to make connections and to celebrate them, to let everyone know that you do appreciate what they do. I am Gabriella said the podcast community is the best ever. Elisa loves the podcast community, so supportive. Lots of people have different mugs and things from podcasts they listen to. So, yeah, it's very cool seeing you there and that you've all been interacting today. I hope that everyone enjoys also the rest of the streams that are coming up. The last one was amazing on the 12-minute conversations and making a huge number of connections there. The podcast brunch club list, if you go to podcastbrunchclub.com, I think it is, you can do join in person is one of the links there, and it'll show you where the chapters are, and you can sign up for one that's in your area. And if there isn't one, maybe you could host one. Thanks for the link. It's like book club, but for podcasts. It's really, really awesome. Yeah. A question, if I have time, what social media platform have you found to be the best for helping make connections? I'd have to say it would be Twitter. Was on Facebook a lot before that, but Twitter has been this amazing one just to make easy connections fast. You get to see sort of a lot of information quickly and about a lot of different things. So people post their episodes there. They have other things. You can have polls. You can like and retweet it. And yeah, that Twitter would be one of my main platforms that I've enjoyed it. I like Instagram for sharing the pictures because mine is a nature-based thing. So I like to share awesome pictures of the really cool place that I live in, and checking out other ones as well. Um, Online connections can be valuable but also draining. So how do you unplug and recharge? Well, that's important for my podcast too. I like to say to reconnect with the things that light us up and sort of disconnect from the stuff that is draining. This is amazing. A lot goes into it. And then I think my whole theme is doing what lights you up, but also sort of having boundaries to that as well. We can't be on all the time. We do need time for ourselves. We do need to disconnect. I like to go for walks, and I have to say that when I do, I don't take podcasts with me because I do passionately love a lot of them and listen to them during the day. But when I'm out there, I'm just listening to the world around me because that has a lot of sounds that we can sort of take for granted or miss because there's so much other busyness happening in our lives. So the online connections are great because they've helped me make friends all around the world that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do otherwise. Being able to hang out here with you today is being done by the internet, but then taking it back and sort of connecting with, I got to make sure that I do the things that I need to do when the sun's shining because that's when I make power, for example. So making sure that there is a bit of a rest for for each of us. Asking Heather how to unplug, that's pretty funny. Yep. Question on Instagram, do you feel like you have to use one? Here's my thing with that, like, about the podcast groups, there's a lot of them, and so joining all of the podcast groups, for example, could be quite overwhelming. I'd suggest probably starting with one and seeing how that goes. With Instagram or any other social media platform, I think while it would be a good idea to probably save the handle of that social media platform so that you can use it later if you want to go down that track, the key theme is the fact that where our energy goes, where our focus goes, our energy flows. So if we're trying to spread ourselves across all the social media platforms, we might not be doing justice to each of them. We might be spreading ourselves too thin. So if your show has got pictures that are kind of integral to what you do, kind of like mine is with nature, Instagram's a place that I do want to be on. If that's not where your audience are, for example, then that's possibly not the best place to be. It's kind of realizing where those connections will happen that you want to have happen that are important to whatever it is that you're creating. Yeah, where our focus goes, our energy flows. Yeah, so Elisa uses Instagram to show more of the podcast experience and friendships, which is the basis of her one. And seeing that visually is really engaging. But then on the flip side of that, there are tools that you can use that help you share that stuff across all of the other platforms so people don't miss out. Like if this, then that is one that'll help natively take your pictures from Instagram and share them other places. So you can connect with all sorts of different things along the way to help make it happen. But I think the most important one is connecting with yourself and the topic that you're talking about, the one that you're passionate about, and making sure that that message gets shared in the way that you want it to without burning yourself out by trying to be in all the places for all the people, because connections will happen. They might just take time. But yeah, they're worth it. The platform that this is being streamed on is Google Hangouts, which is amazing. And I really want to say a huge thank you to the International Podcast Day team for setting all of this up and doing all of the promotional stuff to help us all connect and figure out and find out that it's happening um, today. So Blaze said that a lot of the audience would be on YouTube, so it'd be more important for you to be there. And I totally agree with that. On YouTube, you've got the community function of YouTube, which is kind of like a page where you can do posts to your community and get them engaged there. So that could be a great way to interact with your audience there. And maybe take that off to Discord or somewhere else to have sort of more engagement with them, because reading comments and stuff on YouTube is one thing, but then being able to have the Um, that's cool. There's a special plugin pushing it to the site. So Google Hangouts is being streamed through YouTube Live, and technology's amazing. Jim Collison uses Hangouts 4 or 5 days a week. It works great for him for what he's doing. He does a live recording of a show. That could be another way to engage with your audience. So if you're on YouTube, maybe you do a live stream there, or maybe you don't, but you integrate with the community function there. Thanks, SP. That's a that is a nice compliment. Yeah. All sorts of different tools available to us, different ways of using them. And that comes from experience. It comes from asking, it comes from being in different places, and it comes with time. I think one of the biggest things is not to feel, and it's hard because when you get on this journey, you can feel like you want to build numbers and grow and all of these amazing things. But connect with your passion, your topic, and being able to put it out there so that other people can really connect with it because they see the valuable and the value in it, the genuine person that you are, the care and the quality that you've put into making it, because it helps people connect with it when they enjoy the experience of listening or watching. And then have valuable engagements with other people to let them know you're really listening or interacting with their content as podcast listeners or with other hosts before you ask for a collaboration, for example. Kind of get to know what they're doing first and show what value you could offer them is another thing to make a valuable connection with someone. Susie Buttress is an incredible connection that I made. She hosts the Casual Birder podcast where she does casual birding. So I listened to her show because I was intrigued because it was about nature, about birds. And I said to her that I'd listened and what I enjoyed out of it and how similar our two shows were so that she could see that I had really interacted with her content and could be something where we could both align together and maybe work together in the future. So she joined me for the second Sunshine Summit in August as well. And a huge shout out to her because she's in the UK. So our time zones are completely different. It's like nearly 3 o'clock in the morning, I think, for her. I'm not sure if she made it today, but she's an incredible connection that I've made just by really being genuine and honest and open and actually getting to know the content that she was making. So yeah. How are we going for time?
Yeah, well, Heather, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your story through podcasting. Happy podversary, by the way.
Thank you.
I don't
Thank
know
you.
if I ever shared that to you, but I was looking at the chat and just you talking about creating connections, celebrating connections, and not just, it's not just a one-off connection. You are using your connections over a year to establish these summits and create connections, and it goes beyond that. It's building relationships, it's creating a lifetime friendship, and just looking at the chat and just how many people appreciate what you were doing and just all the shout outs you gave. I mean, that's what it's about, is just sharing the connection you've created. So I can't thank you enough for joining our International Podcast Day feature this year.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, let everybody know out there in podcast land and on our YouTube page where they can find, connect with you. Where's your website? And what podcast do you do?
I'd love for people to connect with me, obviously. So my website is sunshineandpowercuts.com. I have a Twitter handle and Instagram, which is at sunpowerpod. I'm also on Facebook at Sunshine and Power Cuts, or in Discord, there'll be a link somewhere to that on one of those platforms to be able to connect there and hang out.
Well, awesome, Heather. Thank you so much for joining International Podcast Day 2018. To everybody on the live feed, we will be back in just a few moments. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.